Hey, I want to welcome everybody to this week's Matrix discussion group call for tactical sovereignty. I'm just sitting here having a chat with the co-host Keith this evening. This is June 12th, 2022. And looking at the number for tonight's episode, which I believe is like 394. So well over 4 years we've been on here doing this every week, which I think is awesome. It's really given quite a large library for anybody new to go back and check out. But hopefully I normally try to title most of the calls so that people can at least look up whatever specific content we want. But Keith and I were just talking about how we entered into, this situation, this realm. In fact, I think I'm probably going to title this one Realms on YouTube, because that's really what it's about. And we all just kind of discover the realm that we're in, and that we don't know exactly what it's really all about as compared to what we thought or what we were taught or what we were told that things are about. We get out into life, and if things are the way we're taught, then for some reason they just don't operate in the way we think they should operate, according to what we're told. And that's when we discover that there's been at least, I don't want to know if we call it lies, but some untruths told to us about the realm that we found ourselves in.
We'll call them deceived discoveries.
Yeah, there you go. And what a discovery it is, too. And to me, a lot of people get upset and they want to really jump right to that word lie. But really, it is a discovery. And the biggest part of the discovery is when you learn how to use what you found yourself in. That's the biggest discovery of all, right there. I think you would agree, Keith.
Well, yeah, it smacks you in the face because, like I said for a long time, there's more than one process. And so when you realize what position you're in life, there are going to be certain processes that are going to be very valid for you. Whereas if you're in my position, there are certain processes that I just avoid at all costs because there's one process that I've been following that works very well for me. Now, I can't pose it as a process. It's just things that I do in my life according to what happens. And this is the thing that helps keep me in the now time. And sorry about that. And not having to be subject to a recording that is then going to be placed in somebody else's record. In my life, the only record holder is him. And so when I stick to the biblical scripture, like I said earlier, which is what I refer to most, that's because inherently in nature, most people use scripture as a foundation of law. So we'll go to that first, show them their inherent nature is to love each other. Nobody wants to harm each other, in fact, or in reality. And so when we discover that, in fact, they are harming the living soul in reality, and there's a way to prevent that through that process, whether it be following up and doing certain things in that process, or then being able to correct a process that somebody's using against you. It doesn't matter as long as you learn the knowledge that you have as a foundation for correcting things. It doesn't matter what process. It's a step-by-step thing. It's a learning process for everyone. No one knows it all. No one is perfect. We all make mistakes. And this is not something that we just get over one day and all of a sudden now we're perfect. It's a continuous thing that we have to do in life. And when we stop learning, that is when we start dying.
Yeah, I was mentioning to you earlier, Keith, that it seems like one of the things that happens when people start to awaken to the realm that they're in is that, like I said, they will go and jump into, say, maybe, the truth movement or whatever flavor of truth movement that is that they're looking at. There's a lot of different rabbit holes there. But unfortunately, people go and fall into that, and then they cling to that even tighter than they clung on to the falsehoods that they had grown up learning before, without even going and looking at the background or digging into this new information they've come across to see how reliable it is. No, they just grab right onto it and hold on tight and defend it to no end. And I find that just really confusing.
Yeah, and that's why we have organizations like Keith Hemingway. They're just doing somebody else's process, and they're stuck in it. Like you said earlier, they're stuck in it because they're just doing somebody else's process. And that's why we have to get back to our nature and find our own process, because it's going to be one step at a time according to our own interactions.
They're caught in that wash, rinse, repeat cycle. I had mentioned in the group earlier this week because of a post I had made, and it was interesting. One of the things on that post that I put up, I'm trying to remember exactly what it covered, whether it was, I think it was probably one of the forms of jurisdiction. It got flagged and taken down. So I put all of the things together into one post. Because and this is one of the things that I find hilarious too, is that since the beginning, especially if you're going into like the truth rabbit hole, concepts of truth there, then you're going to see one of the biggest things you always hear is questioning jurisdiction. And you can question jurisdiction at any point during a case or even after a case, always question jurisdiction. And when I see people bring that up and talk about that, and then they just stop right there. That's all you get from them. And so, you think, well, okay, people think, well, that's all there is to it. And then you see recordings of people in court, and they're there by special appearance to question jurisdiction. Or I see people
there by special appearance, then you should already know jurisdiction and assert it.
Exactly. And then I even see people just going into court under special appearance, and never once is jurisdiction even questioned.
Yeah, that's why I say, if you go in special appearance, then you should have your documentation already written up and standing and formatted properly so that they can't rebut it, because you just stated the jurisdiction. Now it can no longer be questioned. It's not up for debate. You've been given notice and knowledge. The true beneficiary of the original grant is here. Why are you trespassing? I'm not supposed to be involved in this stuff. Yet you demanded my appearance in this court under threat, duress, and coercion. Are you supposed to be threatening beneficiaries in the trust? If you really knew your jurisdiction, you'd stand on it and not question it.
The trustees have been named and the beneficiary is present.
Correct.
Well, and I think it's funny too, like when I see recordings of people going in and doing this special appearance, and they're here to question jurisdiction, and they want jurisdiction proven. A lot of times I'll see the judge just sit there and be like, okay. And to me, that's the same kind of look or response you would get if you went into Baskin Robbins and, it's your turn at the counter and the cashier says, okay, what can I get you? And you said, ice cream. And the cashier would be like, okay. Because, Baskin Robbins, we got 31 flavors or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing with jurisdiction, and, and specifically if you're there in special appearance, first off, is going to be wanting to address, namely, personal jurisdiction, and secondary attached to that may be subject matter jurisdiction. But I mean, on top of that, if you're questioning jurisdiction, there are so many levels of jurisdiction that you could be questioning. It depends on the situation you're in. Are you questioning the appellate jurisdiction? Like I said, subject matter, personal, diversity jurisdiction, concurrent jurisdiction, exclusive jurisdiction, territorial jurisdiction. I mean, it's like, okay, it's, like the girl in Baskin Robbins. Okay, you want ice cream? Okay, get to it. What? And that's why I think a lot of times the judges know that these people just have no clue what they're even doing. and so they steamroll right over them and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll give you a humorous story in regards to what we're talking about here. And it comes down to the jurisdiction, of course, which is the right words. Jurisdiction, righteous words, okay, or right words. And I'll tell you, this was back in the mid 90s, and I was going through coincidentally a ice cream drive-through, Dairy Queen. And when it came to us, we pulled up to the mic, and me being the smartass and comedian I am, loving to talk to machines, but because I had other people with me that insisted that we just go through the drive-through. Otherwise, if it was me, I'm walking in so I can see somebody face to face. Well, here we are talking through this machine. And I comically thought about the Peanuts gang. And when they get a call over a mechanical device, and all you hear on the end is wah, 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 wah. So this is what I did. When she came across the machine and said, "Can I have your order, please?" I said, "Yeah, we want wah, 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 wah." And I'm telling you, not funny as heck. She came back immediately with, please pull forward. And so I'm telling you, you get out of what you say. You get back what you put out. And she did it perfectly. And that's what we need to start doing to these courts. Like I said earlier, you don't go in questioning jurisdiction. You question it, you go to court prepared with the answer. That's the proper rebuttal. Special appearance with proper rebuttal of not questioning the jurisdiction, but stating the jurisdiction, and now it cannot be acted against. The court cannot move in any other way than that which has already been directed in trust.
Well, I think it's been commonly said, and it's one of my personal rules too, is that you never really ask a question that you don't know the answer to. If you don't know the answer to a question, you might want to look into it before you start asking it, because how else are you going to know if you get the right answer or not?
Exactly. That's why I try my best not to ask questions unless somebody else asks me a question. I'm going to ask them a question in return, just like Jesus did, to help them find the answer.
Yeah, that was probably one of the best examples laid out for anybody was his appearance in court, in front of Pontius Pilate.
Yeah, if you say so.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah. Well, and along with the jurisdictional challenge as well, and I'm going to get into the realm situation. This right here is kind of part of one of the realms that we're in, at least somewhat physically right now. But there's so many little distractions that people are presented with in, I would call it like the Patriot community or whatever, in that flavor of the truth movement anyway. And the whole, special appearance is one of them. And I would say second one, I think people stumble across when they start studying and researching, is they start seeing the phrase common law. And I've addressed this before on other episodes, but I just really find it interesting because, so many people will come up and they'll kick against maybe the definition that I provide. And I'll provide a definition like from Cornell Law University, okay, which shows that common law is really just the judicial decisions common to the courts. That's really what the common law is. And it's the same. That's why every country has its own basic common law. It's whatever is common for their courts to do. I had one gentleman that came right out. He's like, "You're wrong." I'm like, okay. And I love it when people do that. Okay, fine. I'm wrong. Show me where I'm wrong. And it took 3, 4, 5 communications back and forth before they actually presented me with a document or something that pertained to law. And they had highlighted, like, there was like 4 or 5 paragraphs. They had like the part of the first sentence highlighted and then the last paragraph highlighted, which didn't really have anything to do with the question with common law. I thought it was interesting because I went into the second paragraph of what they showed. And the second paragraph right there stated that common law was the judicial decisions common to the courts. And that was something directly from the Supreme Court of the United States of America. So it's like, okay. And it seems like everybody's got their own flavor of what they think common law is. Majority of people mix it up, I think, with natural law, like do no harm or something like that, which that even isn't natural law. There's too many examples of that. I mean, for instance, if do no harm is part of maybe natural law, then explain the lion that goes out and kills another animal to bring back to their cubs. Well, yeah, harm's been done, but it's natural. Sometimes it's natural for harm to be done in nature and in life. The second one really gets my goat, speaking of animals, is the affidavit. And you see so many people sharing, oh, yeah, you've got to submit an affidavit of truth. Well, an affidavit is a document that's written under an oath, in front of a public notary or somebody else that has the authority to sign an affidavit or to notarize an affidavit. So if it's done under oath, then right there, yeah, it's obviously automatically truth. And that's all an affidavit is. You are outlining an event that happened, in a series, and number 1, number 2, number 3, whatever. This is what happened. That's what happened. And then it's ended with a jurat, where you're saying, yeah, this is to the best of my knowledge truth, under penalty of perjury, whatever the case may be. So when people are going and submitting affidavits of truth, it's the same thing as going and questioning jurisdiction or coming in under special appearance. You're showing right off the get that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You have no clue what an affidavit is. And as soon as they see that, guess what's going to happen? They're not even going to respond to it. And most of the time, I think the reason why they don't respond to it is because I'll just say a majority of affidavits I've seen aren't even affidavits. They aren't specifying an event or something. It's like they're trying to educate the courts as to what the courts are supposed to be about.
Right. And I think a lot of people have a failure of communication in a lot of the forms, because any form you put forth, like I said earlier, it's uniform throughout all jurisdictions. So if it's uniform throughout all jurisdictions, then things have to have certain things within them. And if we go back to the college composition handbook, it'll tell you exactly how the instruments are drawn up. The difference is that they have certain elements that are included that are monetary. Guess what? 18 U.S.C. 8, obligations and other securities of the United States, includes, and I'm going to skip down to stamps and other representatives of value. So as long as we clearly speak in plain writing and know how to direct what is already directed, and just show them how that process supposedly works in their military script through the remittances or the accept for value or buying I bonds or cashing in on the double E bonds or whatever. However you perceive it, you have to be able to explain it in truth. Otherwise, once you get to that glitch that you have, they're going to recognize it and say, nope. So you have to really know what you're talking about, and you have to be able to express it in the proper way on that paperwork. And that's a matter of composition. It has to have first a foundation.
And you're always going to be tested too. I mean,
Yes.
that's one of the things that I say also, because so many people want, for instance, templates. And number one, it doesn't matter what the situation is. Every situation is case specific, and there is no one template that's going to cover all of them anyway, because the information that's listed and that the topics that are listed on that document, on that template, all relate to a specific case. So that, there is no general template. And when people just want a general template that all they have to do is just sign it, it's because they don't want to learn. And so you're going to be tested. If you can't back up and defend whatever has been presented, then you don't have any standing, period. I mean, you say you don't have a leg to stand on, there's a lot of truth to that, because your standing is dependent on several legs. And if one of those legs get kicked out from under you, no, you don't have a leg to stand on. You don't have standing.
Nope. And that's why I say when people try to ask me about my living will and testament and stuff, and they want to see a part of it or something, I can't. I don't have such a thing. What I have is his will. It's not my will. As far as I see, it's always proven. A matter of natural observance that actions speak louder than words. Period. I don't need to write things down if it's already written in my heart through those natural observances to observe what's wrong and what's right. And I think that's pretty natural to be able to know as an adult, 55 going on 56 here shortly, that I can reasonably and logically express what's really right and what's wrong. And it doesn't go to the written word. It goes to the intent, period.
Well, if anybody wants a template, actually just jump to the Lord's Prayer. Prayer. What's a prayer? It's a pleading. That right there, there's your living will.
Yep, exactly. I don't live by my will. I live by his. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Not mine.
And let me jump to my next item that I have that I noticed, when researching these things and seeing the different rabbit trails you get sent down in some of these truth movements. And you still hear this phrase all the time today, and it is, we got to get our republic back. We want our republic back. And every time I hear that, that just tells me that somebody didn't do one very simple, basic thing, which is crack open a dictionary and see what the definition of a republic is. Because a republic is defined as a representative form of government. Period. That's what a republic is.
Yeah, representative. That means
so,
those that are putting it forth are the representatives, and they don't elect others to represent it for them.
Yep, that's why you've got your House of Representatives.
Yes.
As long as you've got that House of Representatives standing, no matter how fair or unfair you think the elections are, you still have a representative form of government, which is called a republic. So as far as getting it back, there's no such thing. And if people want to jump back to say 1963 or the Civil War, and they say, oh, that's when it was taken, No, actually, I would refer back to September, I believe it was September of 1789. The book that I've got, Encyclopedia of American History, which used to be a staple in all of the classrooms, but a certain family who will not be named bought out the printing company and pulled it from all the schools and pulled it from all the store shelves. So I spent a year online looking for somebody that had one. And when I finally found it, and it wasn't cheap, and it got sent to me, it was still in the old brown paper that it was probably originally wrapped up in 50 years ago. And you go to the section there where the U.S. Constitution was adopted, the one that was written in 1787 and adopted in 1789, and it said in there, plain and simple, that in September of that year, that the government stepped aside and vacated their offices to make room for the new government. That was when it happened, right there. If you want to call it a republic or whatever you want to call it, the original Constitution and government that was formed under the Articles of Confederation bowed out and left office and made room for the quote-unquote new government. That was when your new government came in. And it wasn't because, and this is another one, it wasn't because in 63 Congress recessed or adjourned sign a day. Congress adjourns sign a day all the time. You can go to something as simple as YouTube and just punch in Congress adjourns sign a die, and you will find it, a whole bunch of them where they're adjourning sign a die. And it's because that when their session is over, it's because there's been an election and there's going to be a new Congress coming in. Maybe 90% of them will all be the same guys, but there's going to be some new ones. So instead of, say maybe the 43rd Congress, you're now going to have the 44th Congress coming in. That's something that a lot of people, they just don't really learn maybe or pay attention to in school, especially civics. But
Well, and you're absolutely correct there, because if people took into that fact, that education, that roots of the knowledge that I was talking about earlier before the recording started, the roots of the knowledge in this postal system that we have today started from the Pony Express, which started in 1860. 3 years later, because the Pony Express was so well recognized and potential recognition of its use, that it went from private to public. See, the Pony Express was a set of private carriers that agreed amongst each other to go from post to post, no matter what it took. And then to relieve that, and of course, everybody, because of convenience, said, okay, great. Now we don't have to put ourselves as such surety in such natural disasters as any means necessary, going through rain, sleet, and snow. See everybody's convenience by the rain, sleet, and snow being taken care of by the Postal Service. When back in the day, you would go to the center of town and post your shit on a post. Okay? And if you had something that you needed to post in a different town, you would go to a private carrier, a Pony Express. Today, we have a totally different system, and every last bit of it, like I said earlier, again, actions speak louder than words. And so people are convenienced by letting somebody else act for them in all capacities that they can think of. And it's all a convenience, and everybody takes all of those conveniences instead of realizing the importance of that plenipotentiary power within themselves to do it all at no cost. Period. I yield.
Yeah, it just takes a little bit of effort on their own part. And, the society today, especially for USA, has been referred to many times. It's really centered around being a service provider society. It's based on services, and that's exactly it right there. Everybody's kind of lazy, and if they can get somebody else to perform the service for them, they'll do it. But the problem is you go and you shirk off or set aside your responsibility to something and let somebody else take care of it. And look and see where you end up at, because they might not do things quite the way you wanted them done. That's why the old saying is, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself, right?
Well, yeah. And I love your shirt there. It says liability, and it's got the scales.
Yep.
And see, what happens is that when you buy a convenience, it tips the scale. Now you're liable. Whenever you have to buy something that causes you to have to buy insurance on it, where's the liability? And why is it you are liable? Somebody tried telling me, well, if you've got a car shop, you've got to carry liability insurance. I said, wait a minute. Under the occupancy certification, which is through the Safety Administration, which is your fire department. That's a fire marshal. Okay. Now, despite anybody having any contract whatsoever, because it's protected area, just because the car shop owner doesn't have insurance doesn't mean the fire department is going to refuse to come put out the fire. They have a duty and liability to the rest of the community to come put out that fire to keep it from spreading to the rest of the community. So who truly holds the insurance and the liability, and in what respect do they truly hold it? Now we can determine our capacity to run a car shop. And if we actually require ourselves to carry insurance to put somebody else at liability of risking their life to put the fire out. See, it's all a matter of creating a convenience for somebody else to take care of that liability. Whereas if you follow the regulations and have the set fire extinguishers in the right places, you're covered. Whether you got insurance or not. All you have to do is be able to make sure that you can put out that fire yourself. Now it's when we start violating those things, are the true actions that would affect putting out a dangerous fire, and therefore giving up our true responsibility and liability because we failed in looking out for our brother's safety and not putting it on the fire department. Oh, well, I've got insurance. If I fail on updating the fire extinguishers and they're still there and people believe that they'll work, then I'm okay. No, because then if you step up under that insurance and try to put out a fire, but the fire extinguisher, because it's 3 years old and wasn't renewed 2 years ago when it was required to be renewed, now you put the convenience of insurance and liability on somebody else to risk their fucking life, excuse my language, to prevent what you thought was preventable. But because of your own negligence and thinking that the insurance would cover it, you prove the requirement for insurance because you're not even qualified to be running a car shop, let alone putting up extinguishers to prevent a fire. You've proven by your own reason and logic that you will, in fact, put other people's lives at risk rather than truly being their brother's keeper. I yield.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I wear this shirt. I've got a couple of these I've had made. Yeah, they're good conversation starters. And, what you just said reminds me of something else, actually, really should be added to this list. And that is that word rights. Because you hear people all the time say, I know my rights. I mean, I even heard somebody at work one time say, I know my constitutional rights. And I looked at him and I said, bullshit, you've never even read the Constitution. Because if they had, they would have known that it doesn't afford any rights to you. But anyway, if you hear people talking about rights and they don't bring up what Keith just mentioned, which is responsibility, then they've never even studied rights, and they have absolutely no business even teaching rights to anybody. Because anytime you start researching rights and what rights really are, what rights are derived from, you'll always find that, connected right at the hip with rights is going to be that word responsibility or that word duty. And that's something people don't want. People don't want responsibility. They don't want liability. I like wearing this shirt because it's a good conversation starter. Like I said, it really goes to the heart of what really runs society today. And what runs society today is that word liability. And nobody wants liability. They always want to ditch it off on somebody else. And until people can start being responsible for themselves and responsible for their own actions, then number one, you have no rights, period. Sorry. Today, we've fallen into a situation so much that seems to follow that mantra of do as thou wilt. Well, I'm sorry. You can't just do as thou wilt because it is going to affect somebody else. You've got to have somebody putting out that fire if you can't do it yourself, because it could spread to the home next door or to other properties and could do harm or damage to somebody else. So do as thou wilt should not be the mantra. I often think, when I pull up to a stop sign, I think, when people pull up to the stop sign, do they stop at it because it's the law? Do they stop at it because they're afraid there might be an officer around the corner that thinks they didn't stop quite long enough and might give them a ticket, and so they want to prevent getting a ticket and
Yeah,
being
did they fear their
responsible?
God? Did they fear their God? The
Yeah,
person watching around the corner?
yeah, right. That's their God, exactly. To me, when I stop at a stop sign or I stop at a stoplight, I'm not doing it because I'm afraid of getting a ticket or something like that going on. I'm doing it because I want to make sure I don't harm my neighbor. I'm taking responsibility. That
Exactly. It goes to the intent. And like I said, I would feel really bad if somehow there is a way to know. If I was to prevent somebody from being born in some way or another, say I had a car accident and killed the woman's baby, but not her. And somehow, if that baby had been born and I had knowledge of what that baby would do and that baby would be one of the greatest people in mankind's history, I would feel really bad. And so I keep that kind of a thought as a perception that what if I'm one of those people that crucifies Jesus? What if I'm one of those people that aborts a baby that would have turned out like Einstein or Tesla or and it always comes back to the intent of I'm supposed to be my brother's keeper because that's my potential. I can be one of the greatest people. He said, ye shall do greater things than I. And so if I'm going to love my brother to the same extent, then I've got to treat him as one of the greatest people that would ever live on this earth. I yield.
it makes me think. I think it was Beethoven. Wasn't it Beethoven that was like the 11th, 12th, or 13th child born in the family? All of the earlier offspring had either been stillborn or born with either physical or mental defects, something like that. And so, if the laws of today had applied back then, odds are we would have never had a Beethoven.
Right. Well, and not only that, but even Beethoven, I'll have to look it up again, but even Beethoven is thought to have been autistic.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
I know a couple musicians, I'll have to find them as well, that play music by vibration and they're deaf. They are
Yep.
literally deaf, but they can play percussion instruments and even wind instruments because of the vibrations.
There's quite a few people that I personally know. Greta Thunberg isn't one of them, so I'm not going to add her into this mix. But I mean, there's a number of people that I know that have autism or something like Asperger's that's in the autism spectrum who are incredibly brilliant people. I mean, just super smart people. And most people wouldn't even know that they had something like that.
Yeah, and don't get it wrong, because I'm not autistic.
Yeah. I don't know. That maybe we could all use a little bit of an autism strain running through us. But
That's what I was talking about. I wish I was.
you had mentioned the year 1860 a little while ago, and I want to follow that up with something else I have on my list, which is the Organic Act of 1871. And I've even seen some pretty notable YouTube channels that cover it and talk about that being the time that a new government was brought in. And I remember when I was first hearing people talk about this and mention it, something just didn't feel right. So I went and looked it up. I said, how many of these people that talk about this have actually pulled up the Act of 1871 and read it to see what it is? Because all it simply was a town or a city that was organizing itself as being incorporated. Which, I'm sorry, there's a lot of people that yell and scream about incorporation. I think it has its place, and there's other places where it doesn't have its place. But that's all that was simply happening with the Organic Act of 1871, is that the charters for the city of Washington and the city of Georgetown were being repealed, and a new city with those two combined, called the District of Columbia was being put in place. That is all that was happening. It wasn't a new government for the whole USA. And in fact, this government running things today, um, which really is the nation, the United States. That's where you're going to find them at. Where's the United States? It is in Congress assembled. It says it right in their documents. The United States in Congress assembled. That's where you're going to find the federal government at. And I think one of the greatest things Biden did was his mask mandate. I've mentioned this before, because it shows you right where that federal government's jurisdiction ends and begins. It is with the District of Columbia and with federal territories and buildings, period. That's it. He put out the mask mandate. It was Section 2 of that act, and it was a mandate for all federal employees. And then it got into, I think it was Section 3, as far as the general population, and it was a mask encouragement, not a mandate, because it couldn't be mandated. And so for everybody that is so worried about who the president is and things like that, I'm sorry. Whatever happened with this election really to me is no big deal. If you think that something fraudulent occurred, well, you go back in time and memoriam and you're going to see that these same allegations have been given over and over again in numerous elections. Going back, 200 years, this has been going on over and over again. But you know what? The next morning when you wake up, your boss at work is still the same boss. That barista giving you your coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, she's still the same barista the next morning. The same guy at the gas station that's been there for 10 years is still there the next morning. Nothing in your life really changes.
No.
But, I mentioned realms, and I think right now we're living in a time and an age that is more remarkable than most people comprehend. When mankind strives to do something, man in his heart, in his nature, is really carnal, normally self-centered. And so whatever man organizes, and you can see the same thing with, corporations, whatever man organizes, whatever man does, eventually fails. It eventually implodes on itself just because his own faulty nature. And if you go back over time, looking at all of the different governments and nations that came into existence and went away, that generally, 250 years is about the max. Look at the Holy Roman Empire. I don't know how holy or Roman it really was, but you look at that empire and look at all the different territories that were involved with it, and the fight for different kings or monarchs to rise and fall. And it became only a natural conclusion when you see how things happen in history that they would want a new world order, because the order of how things were dictated at those times was not very healthy. In fact, to be a monarch or be a king was not a good job choice, put it lightly. You normally ended up dying, sequestered away into a prison somewhere, if you were lucky. Otherwise, you were probably beheaded. And things were even done at those times for spiritual reasons. They beheaded people because they felt that if this king or this monarch was beheaded, then they couldn't be reunited with their body in the afterlife and come back and seek revenge. To me, that's just a little crazy, but anyway. But of course, they would choose or opt for having a new order of the ages and a new way of doing things. And what better way than to have the people think or have the people feel like they have a dog in the hunt or that they are in charge of something. When really at the end of the day, they truly aren't. And I went and did some researching, but I can do this, and looked up when, for instance, voting started. Not just in the USA, because in the onset, the popular vote wasn't even used with the presidency. It was never even intended to be part of the presidency. Marshall even said that having the general man, vote for the monarch or for the king would be like giving a blind man his choice of colors. It's just not very smart, because we really don't know the inner workings of what's really going on up there in DC and especially internationally. All you know is the BS that's fed to you by the talking heads on TV. But what smarter way than to have people at least think that they are a part of the game, a player in the game, than having supposedly a say through a role like voting. And then that way the people can argue amongst each other. And as long as the people are arguing amongst each other, they're not looking at the king or looking at the president and thinking about rolling out the guillotine. It's going to save a lot of problems right there. And it's worked very well for them. It's done very well. But like I said, on top of it, this is all part of a construct of man, and constructs of man always end up imploding on themselves. If you look at anything man does, it's not designed to last. Think, for instance, of a football game. What if that football game was to last in perpetuity? It wasn't set to a certain time level or X amount of quarters or a halftime or anything like that. What would end up happening in that football game? Well, that's very much like what's going on, say, worldwide or in a nation or in a state. The only difference is that, the players get replaced by new players. Older people die off, the younger people grow up, but they grow up into the same idea, the same construct and direction that society has been molded and pushed to move into. And what we're seeing today is really a culmination, it's a bottleneck of what was put in place several thousand or even several hundred years ago. And everything that man puts into place is going to come to an end result. And we're getting closer and closer right now to that end result in this realm. And I would say at the same time that this is probably doing nothing but mirroring even the war being seen in the heavens, in the spiritual realm.
People are going to come to a point one way or another, either no longer willing to buy convenience or no longer willing or able to buy convenience. You're no longer able to buy or sell because you don't have the mark of the beast. So if you take upon the mark of the beast, then you're willing to buy convenience. One way or another, people are going to have to make a decision now.
But even with that mark, though,
wobbly, wishy-washy, this or that, you're going to have to make a final decision yourself.
Even with that mark, though, that's not going to be something that, this is just going to continue on into the future. No, this is all part of the bottleneck. And this is all part of what is going to create the implosion.
Right. It's what's going to be creating the new realm of convenience. Because it's not going to have anything to do with money or anything. It's going to have to do with people that en masse can't survive and this and that, and they're going to come to things that they're not used to doing. People do murderous things, just like an animal cornered. Man is an animal. When they finally get cornered and destitute, people will start doing things they never thought of before, and it's because they're no longer convenienced. It's like a woman scorned. When you take away man's convenience that they've subsisted on for so long, they will become destitute. And that is the turning key, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, it's just leading to a point of, what level of destitution people get to and what they become comfortable with. And at some point, they're not going to be comfortable with any level of it anymore. Think of it as a road that's heading towards a cliff. Well, there's a lot of offshoots, and you can take a right on this road and take another path, but they're all heading towards a cliff. Some of them, the cliff is a little bit closer, and some of them, the end of that cliff is a little bit further away. But either way, you're going to come to that bottleneck where everything is being pushed into a direction, and you're going to come to the edge of that cliff. And whether this is a physical reset or even it just becomes a mental reset for mankind, which I'm not sure if I would hope that it'd be a mental reset or not, because the mental state that I see a lot of people in, I'm not sure if I would really trust their judgment. But on an individual level, that's what the reset's going to be. You can have your own reset, and you need to create it.
That would be is reset back to reason and logic. Wake up, folks. Think about this in reality and see it for what it is. Like I said with the 42 USC 1395X, if all moms and dads knew this was the inpatient hospital services that they were being provided, known as a spell of illness, they certainly wouldn't go through with it in that context. They would let them know, no, this is not a spell of illness. Simply that alone tells me that people are just not reading because it's too convenient to have somebody else do it for them. They're getting away from what you spoke earlier about common law, custom law. Ritual law was to have your baby at home. When did we start changing that? When hospitals made it convenient.
Yeah, it made people feel more safe. It's safer to put my liability and responsibility in the hands of somebody else. Always falls back to the same thing.
Yeah, you can take the liability of that out of the family completely by handing it over to some licensed doctor who claims to be a physician. Under God. He took an oath under God for the commercial license. Excuse me, for the government contract license. And then he contracted under a Hippocratic oath to Apollo and the Greek gods. Who's more confused? Who is more under a spell of illness? Me or the doctor? I yield.
Yeah, and what's a Hippocratic oath? It's just something else that man came up with, because man knows best. Well, we've hit an hour. Anyway, Keith, somebody had their hand up earlier, and they were only here for like 30 seconds and disappeared. So I guess that's what everybody wants nowadays. They want immediate satisfaction. Oh, I'm sorry. The best things in life sometimes are worth waiting for and putting some effort of your own into. And that's why I say learn who you are, where you're from, and where you're really at, because that's going to be what changes your life. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Keith.
Yep. Amen. Bless y'all. Love you. Bye.
Bye.